Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today here at the Sonoma County Drought Update for Thursday, July 7th. I'm Linda Hopkins. I'm the 5th District Supervisor for the County of Sonoma and a member of the Board of Directors at the Sonoma Water Agency. Let's go ahead and begin with a brief message from Gilbert Martinez with our communications team for our Spanish-speaking viewers. Gilbert?
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la sesión informativa. Esperamos tener esta sesión informativa transmitiendo en vivo por nuestro canal de YouTube con interpretación al español. Para escuchar la versión en español, puede usar el link de YouTube que se encuentra en la página del Facebook del Condado de Sonoma. Gracias. Y ahora regresamos para atrás con supervisora Linda Hopkins.
Thank you so much, Gilbert. So this is the third of a series of monthly town halls that Sonoma Water will be staging this summer and fall to give you the latest and greatest information on the drought and how it's impacting Sonoma County. We're joined today by a panel of subject matter experts: Brooke Bingaman, the lead forecaster with the National Weather Service; Leslie Choate, an environmental health program manager with the Sonoma County Department of Health Services; Bert Whitaker, the director of Sonoma County Regional Parks; and our county's communications manager, Paul Gullickson. Also want to mention that although they're not part of the formal panel, we do have some additional subject matter experts available to answer questions after we go through our presentations, which includes Don Seymour, Deputy Chief Engineer at Sonoma Water, and he is working with the state on water curtailments, although he wants you to know that he is not the state water board, and so he does not speak for the state, but he can be available to answer kind of questions from a local perspective. We are also joined by Rich Fadness, coordinator for the Surface Water Ambient Monitoring Program of the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, which is a mouthful. And he can answer additional questions about cyanobacteria and brings that subject matter expertise from the Regional Water Board. We're also joined by Andrea Rodriguez and Barry Dugan with Sonoma Water. So really, we're here to give you an update on the drought in Sonoma County, including a new long-term forecast on weather patterns that could impact the amount of rain that we get this winter. We're also going to be focusing on the impact the drought is having on water quality in the Russian River, which I know is near and dear to many of the folks that I represent in the lower Russian River. That not only supplies water for 600,000 people in Sonoma and Marin counties, but is obviously also a beloved summertime destination for not only our local residents in the lower Russian River and upper Russian River, but also thousands of Sonoma County residents and folks from further afield who seek relief from the heat. We're also going to be exploring a little bit about the effects of the drought on recreation along the river and other parts of our regional park system, which is the perspective that Bert Whitaker, our regional parks director, can bring. So at the end, we've made time to answer as many of your questions as we can. There are 3 different ways that you can pose questions to our panelists. If you have joined us via Zoom, please go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A box. If you're watching this on Facebook or on YouTube, you can type the questions into the comment areas below. And then at the end, Paul Gullickson and I will tag team on asking and funneling those questions to the appropriate subject matter expert. Finally, there is one more way that you can ask questions, and that is by emailing our public affairs teams at publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org. Again, that's publicaffairs@sonoma-county.org. And we've got folks who are monitoring that inbox to kind of funnel those questions over to us. You know, as you're going to hear about today, it's very, very difficult to predict when this drought will end. It is now in its 3rd year, and our region's 2 main water storage reservoirs, Lake Sonoma and Lake Mendocino, are near historic lows. As of today, Lake Sonoma is at 53% of capacity, and Lake Sonoma is at 59% capacity. In other words, both are nearly half empty. If you look at the world the way maybe some of us do, on the other hand, at least they're half full, right? There is no guarantee that we're going to be getting enough rain this winter to replenish our reservoirs. And that is why conservation this summer in particular is absolutely critical. Remember that water saved now is water that we can use later. And saving water now will reduce the chance that we will have to take even more drastic measures next year if we have another dry winter. That's one reason why Sonoma Water began cutting flows in the Russian River 2 weeks ago. This action, approved by the State Water Resources Control Board, commits Sonoma Water and its retail customers to a 20% reduction in diversions from the Russian River for the summer and fall compared to 2020. So what that means is that more than 600,000 people who live in Sonoma and Marin counties need to use 20% less water this summer than they did 2 years ago. That sounds like a huge number, but you might be surprised at how much water you can save with a few simple steps. So for water saving tips and programs you can take advantage of to conserve water and save money, visit savingwaterpartnership.org. And that's savingwaterpartnership.org. There is one other important development that I want to mention. Last week, the State Water Resources Control Board issued what are called curtailments to 331 water rights holders in the Russian River watershed, mostly in the upper part of the river. The curtailments actually prohibit those people from drawing water from the river and from some creeks and streams. This action reflects the fact that there is simply not enough water in some locations for folks to continue pumping. According to Mary Callahan's article last week in the Press Democrat, the State Water Board will actually likely issue more curtailments later this summer as the summer progresses. Now, we don't have anyone with the State Board available to answer questions today, but we do plan to delve more deeply into this topic at future town halls, and we'll definitely line up someone from the state in the future to answer your questions. So with that, I want to hand it over to our fantastic subject matter experts for the latest information on the drought. We're going to go ahead and start with Brooke. Thank you so much for joining us from the National Weather Service, and I'm really excited to hear this overview of the current drought conditions and hopefully also a sneak peek at the long-term forecast. Brooke, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Linda. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that I can show you guys a bunch of fun sciencey stuff. All right, so I am one of the forecasters in the NWS Bay Area, and I also lead our climate team. And before we jump into drought and the long-term forecast, I do want to give everyone a heads up that the outlook for the upcoming week into 2 weeks is that much of the Western US is going to be above normal temperatures. So keep your eyes and ears peeled in case we have to end up issuing some heat advisories or even some heat warnings in the next couple of weeks. Now with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the drought situation. So what I have here on this slide are 3 places within Sonoma County: the airport, Healdsburg, and Petaluma. And I'm showing you data that represents what's currently happening as well as what has happened in the past several years. Now, the bold numbers next to each location represent how much precipitation we normally get in an average year. And if you look at all these numbers, the biggest thing that stands out is that the last time we had a really good winter was back in 2018 to 2019. Since then, we have been below normal precipitation, and we have had a couple of La Nina winters already. So it's going to be interesting to see how the upcoming winter plays out. And this data represents water years, which starts October 1st to September 30th. That's how California measures the water supply to see if we have enough water to get us through the drier months in summer and early fall. Now, the Climate Prediction Center does a seasonal outlook, and I don't think it's a big shock to anyone that the drought is likely to persist through the summer, because those are typically our driest months. In fact, the only really source of moisture we get during the summer is along the coast. We'll get some drizzle with coastal fog. And then we can also sometimes get a little bit of rain with some monsoon thunderstorms if they drift northward far enough from the desert Southwest. The problem with those thunderstorms is that it also can bring lightning, which is a fire risk. So that's kind of a double-edged sword. So you probably are wondering, okay, summer's going to stay dry, but what's going to happen this winter? Is it ever going to rain again? And I'm going to jump into some sciencey graphics. So bear with me, but I will walk you through it so that hopefully you have a good understanding of what's to come. First, we're going to do a quick review of what does it mean to have an El Nino winter and a La Nina winter. And basically, it just is a matter of where the jet stream sets up during those winters. The jet stream location is important because as winter storms track across the Pacific Ocean, in an El Nino winter, the jet stream focuses more of those storms towards Southern California, whereas in a La Nina winter, it focuses more of those winter storms to the Pacific Northwest. Now, if you look at these maps, one thing that's intriguing is that for the Bay Area, including Sonoma County, we're not directly under either of those signals. And because of our location, that can add some variability to the outlook. And I wanted you guys to be aware of that. I'll touch on it later. So here's a big complicated graph with a bunch of lines, but I have highlighted the one that's most important. This is the official consensus outlook from the Climate Prediction Center as to what the El Nino La Nina signal is going to do. And as of right now, they're showing that there's about a 60% chance that we will return to a La Nina signal, which typically brings us drier conditions. That's going to happen in fall into early winter. But what I've noted is that the more interesting part of this outlook is towards the end of the graph, where we get into the heart of winter, December, January, and February. Those are our wettest months, and that's when we get the most precipitation. And if you look at this outlook, it's showing that we should trend back towards a neutral signal. If that happens, then it could give us a better chance of getting normal precipitation in this upcoming water year. However, this isn't a slam dunk guarantee. We're very early on in this outlook. In fact, there's going to be an update next week on July 14th by the Climate Prediction Center. And the official winter outlook actually doesn't come out until October. So there's plenty to monitor until we get into October. Another thing I want you all to understand is that not all La Niñas or El Niños are the same. The map or the graph here is actually showing all the La Niña winters that have happened since 1950. And if you take a look at this, you'll notice that along the West Coast, it's not always a definite wet or dry pattern. So there is some variability because the La Nina and El Nino signals can be strong, moderate, or weak. And plus there are other circulations in the atmosphere that can influence the La Nina or El Nino signal. And what I have here are some resources in case anyone is interested and wants to monitor themselves or learn more information. And I'll share these links in the Q&A if folks are interested. The first link is from drought.gov, and it specifically highlights Sonoma County. If you click there, you'll get some interesting statistics, and they update the outlooks from the Climate Prediction Center as soon as they're updated. Next, we have climate.gov. And that has a lot of great information and some good articles that are written for the general public if you want to learn more about El Nino or La Nina. And finally, I've also listed the Climate Prediction Center's website so that you can take a look at what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, the next month, the next 3 months. And you can also look up the latest discussions on El Nino, La Nina. So finally, I just want to remind you all about the key points that, yes, it does look like we'll go back to a La Nina signal in fall and early winter, but we really need to monitor what the trend is for those wet months of December, January, and February, because that will really tell us what could happen to our water supply for the following summer. And remember that the official winter outlook comes in October, and that during a La Nina winter, there can be some variability. So be prepared for the possibility of a mix of dry and wet months this coming winter. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen. And I'll turn it back over to Linda.
Thank you so much, Brooke. I really appreciate it. It was a great presentation. I also wanted to briefly mention, someone commented on the chat. I apologize for the late start time. Someone said that it was rude of us to start late, and we were actually caught between two rude paths forward, which is that unfortunately our Spanish translator wasn't here right at 4 o'clock. And so we were waiting a few minutes in hopes that they would join us so that we could provide that real-time Spanish translation. So again, apologies for the slightly delayed start, but we were trying to assist our Spanish speaking viewers. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Leslie Choate, who is our Environmental Health Program Manager with the Sonoma County Department of Health Services. And she can talk a little bit about sort of public health and the Russian River. Leslie?
Good afternoon, everyone. So Ted, if you will please put up my PowerPoint. So I'm here to talk about our water monitoring program on the Russian River related to recreational health. Next slide, Ted. So we monitor for bacteria along the Russian River Also Spring Lake Swimming Lagoon and the ocean beaches along the Sonoma coast. So with the Russian River and Spring Lake, we monitor for recreational activities between Memorial Day and Labor Day. And with the State Ocean Water Program, we monitor between April and the last week of October. What we monitor for is any levels above 10,000 colonies per milliliter for total coliform, and 235 above 235 colonies per 100 milliliters for E. coli. So you can see here we have a beach hotline, also our environmental health webpage. We post results, and those results, you can check those numbers weekly to see if it's safe and, make some informed decisions about whether or not you want to use our beaches for recreational activities. So next slide, please. So here are the 10 beaches that we monitor along the Russian River. And we, again, those are the levels that we monitor for. Next slide, please. And also the 7 locations at the Spring Lake Lagoon that our samples are pulled from. And again, those samples are posted weekly. Next slide. And here are the 7 beaches along the ocean coast that we monitor and take samples from weekly. Next slide. So we're here to talk about what are the impacts to recreational health as related to the drought. And so as the water levels decrease in the Russian River, impacts to water quality increase the possibility of waterborne diseases. And so that's something to keep in mind. Swimmer's itch can happen, higher levels of E. coli and total coliform, also cholera, all kinds of things can happen. So those are all really good reasons why you don't want to just drink straight from the river. But you can still swim in it and have fun and have some of those recreational activities. So the other item that happens is with reduced water flows, we lose the diversity and abundance of fish. Impacts to boating activities with less water, it's less floating, less ability to really enjoy it. And also it promotes the growth of blue-green algae, also known as cyanobacteria is the proper term for it. Keep in mind when we talk about blue-green algae, there's lots of different types of blue-green algae. Cyanobacteria is something that can have toxins associated with that, such as antitoxins, cylindrospermopsin, microcystin. So those are the proper terms that are used to describe those toxins. And those have levels that can be detrimental to health and wellness. And then of course, loss of swimming areas. And these are just a few of the items that are impacted with regard to reduced water flows. Next slide, please. So we also have our toxic algae alerts that we have just put up along the Russian River, new signage that we work collaboratively with the regional water board since 2015. We work with them and we monitor conditions along the Russian River with the regional board, and based on those conditions, we may post toxic algal alert. And as a matter of fact, today, we did post toxic. There was evidence that there was some algae present related to cyanobacteria, and we posted toxic algal alert at just Patterson Point. So that's where we're at with that. We follow the California harmful algal bloom guidance, and these signs are part of that guidance. Next slide. These signs are for a different type of cyanobacteria, and they can be prevalent in different locations. And so there are times that we may post caution based on visual observations, based on the type of cyanobacteria that we find. Next slide. So what are some of the side effects that can be experienced related to cyanobacteria? Sore throat or congestion, coughing, blisters, hives, diarrhea, vomiting. Any of these items, we highly recommend that if after recreating on the river or any location that is the lake that you might be experiencing these things, you should seek your physician, seek out your direction from your physician on how to move forward. That said, sometimes you could experience these things because, you had too much fun or whatever, but it's not always related to cyanobacteria. And I will say that it often, in terms of human contact with cyanobacteria, it's highly unlikely that it was cyanobacteria. The most at-risk population would be animals. So your dogs, you're playing on the river, eating the algae, that is a more likely, that can happen in a more likely way. So next slide. So, what do? We still, still want to have fun. We still want to, recreate on the river. We still want to boat. We still want to do all these things. So we say, okay, let's do it this way. Practice healthy habits. Keep your animals away from the algae. Make informed decisions. Don't let your children play in the algae. So these are all things that you can do to prevent any sort of sickness. If you catch fish and you want to eat it, it's fine to eat it. You just need to clean the fish and you can have the flesh, but not the guts. So, and when you clean it, be careful. You don't want the flesh to come in contact with the guts if there was cyanobacteria in that location. So next slide, please. So here are some resources and information that you can look into. And you're always welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions about recreating on the river, and I'll do my best to answer those. So, and that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. Now we'll hand it over to Bert Whitaker, Director of Sonoma County Regional Parks, to talk a little bit about recreation and the drought. Bert?
Thank you, Supervisor Hopkins, and give me a moment here as I pull up the screen. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And speak a little bit here about drought conditions in our regional parks and a little bit about the Russian River. So certainly the drought conditions are very serious in many of our regional parks and are causing us to adjust operations and service levels, things you may see out there while enjoying the facilities. But things like water efficiency has been a priority, working with our day use visitors and our campers to reduce things like shower times and washing of boats after leaving waterways, and just other common sense approaches. We are definitely having some challenges with groundwater wells. Many of our athletic fields depend on groundwater sources. And really last summer, we saw many of them start to fail and have inability to water. And have made adjustments through the off season this year and watching those very closely this year to see if we can get those fields through without them being completely brown all summer. You also, as you use the parks, you may see a few closed permanent restrooms. And we really provided non-flushing chemical toilets due to some water availability to a few of those facilities. And out there looking at the parks too, you may see more tree mortality, more trees falling over adjacent to trails. And that's definitely been on the upswing for a number of years now. As we look at all this, we're definitely working hard to try and adapt the system with new strategies of things like water catchment systems around the roofs of new restroom buildings, other ways to irrigate native plant restorations we're doing at many locations across the parks, and other adaptive approaches, and recognizing that this drought is ongoing. And as was mentioned earlier, we don't know when it will actually ease up on us. The Russian River, it is summer and it is in full swing, and certainly want to invite you and your family and friends to come out and have an experience in the Russian River. The county operates 8 river parks along the river, in addition to other public and private beaches that provide different levels of public access. What you see here is actually a fishing and access guide that's available out at the regional parks as well as online. It kind of showcases what's available at our facilities. Most river beaches have locations suitable for swimming and accessible parking, picnic areas, and restrooms that are available. Parking is free at our facilities with the park membership or a $7 daily fee, and there are fee stations at the park where you can take care of that. And we do have open water lifeguards on duty at Healdsburg Veterans Memorial Beach daily from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. through the Labor Day weekend. Also, most of our river parks provide access for hand launching of kayaks, canoes, stand-up paddleboards, and other inflatable devices. And also, just so everyone's aware, along the river corridor, there are 2 summer dams in place this year, installed by the Russian River Parks and Recreation District. That is the Vacation Beach Dam just downstream of Guerneville, as well as Johnson's Beach in Guerneville. And there is no summer dam this year at Healdsburg Veterans Memorial Beach due to the low water conditions. I'm also pleased to announce that our new kayak and paddleboard boat launch at Guerneville River Park is nearly complete, and you should see that open for public use in the next week or so. Also, I wanted to mention, we are in the 2nd summer offering the Regional Parks River Shuttle. Free parking is available at Tom Shofflin Fields off Old Redwood Highway, just south of Mark West Springs Road. And this shuttle is running on weekends, holidays, from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. through the Labor Day weekend. Tickets available are online. An all-day shuttle costs $5 per person. And the shuttle drops you off at Steelhead Beach, about 10 minutes from where you park your car. And it's about a 4 to 5 hour float. And then the shuttle is there to pick you up at Sunset Beach and return you to your vehicle. Bring your deflated raft or tube, and we do have inflation stations available at Steelhead Beach behind the restroom building to get you on the water quickly. And definitely search Russian River Shuttle online for more information and to get tickets. We're also at Regional Parks continuing to provide the water safety patrols at river parks with park rangers and water safety personnel. And most river park locations have a free borrow a life jacket station for kids and adults to use while enjoying the river. It is just to share a little bit about what we're seeing out there in the regional parks. And really the overall trend is river recreation has been increasing steadily over the last decade. And during the summers, with the pandemic of 20 and 21, really unbelievable levels of use out there at the river parks. Just kind of paint the picture, we really see steady weekday utilization, and if temperatures heat up, especially above about 85 degrees, we see families coming out in pretty large numbers in the afternoon to use the parks as places to cool off in the shade and enjoy some time outside. Weekends are exceptionally busy with parking areas often filled by 11 a.m. And then also just an observation that's notable. We're seeing a general trend where we call them float Saturdays. Visitors tend to bring more devices out to the river and go travel down the river from point to point on inner tubes and paddleboards and kayaks on Saturdays. And on Sundays, we see more what we think of as a traditional use of the parks, with visitors bringing in picnic supplies and pop-up tents and chairs and to enjoy their spot on the river for the day. So it's just good to kind of know these trends and think about your own recreation on the river. And certainly the drought impacts on the river. And we certainly see lower flows the past few years, but there's still pretty adequate water in the river for recreation. And also seeing that as folks use a lot more of inner tubes and inflatable devices, they're much lighter in weight and easier to portage over some of the areas that may be too shallow to navigate because of the lower flows. We've also, seen relatively few water quality postings for bacteria and blue-green algae over the past few summers, even with the lower flows in the river. So we're optimistic about that. And finally, I just wanted to bring you up to speed on a few other little things. Regional Parks has been working closely with our Sonoma County Tourism, as well as the nonprofit Leave No Trace organization, to really look at developing messages and strategies to minimize the impacts to the outdoor experience when visiting our parks. And really just want to encourage everyone to first learn about the parks you plan to visit. There's a lot of information available online. You have to be prepared for crowded parking lots and beaches, especially on weekends and holidays. And a good tip is just to arrive early, especially those living here in the county. It's a little easier to do so. But get there before 10 a.m. or if you're not going to make that time frame, it's really best. You can have a much more calm experience finding parking coming in around 3 or 4 in the afternoon while we still have the longer days of summer. Please avoid parking in neighborhoods. Instead, have a plan B option available. Think about another place you might like to visit. Oftentimes we find river visitors ending up out at the beach and the coast to have an experience out there if the river parks are full. If you are floating the river, take a look at the travel times available on our regional parks website. That shows the different pull in, pull out locations and about how many hours you can expect for that to float via a kayak. And also certainly be ready for changing weather conditions, especially in the middle and lower river area this time of year. Afternoon winds do come up and can make it more difficult to navigate the river, and fog can quickly roll in and cool things down quicker than you might imagine. Bring plenty of water. Drinking water is not available at many locations. And your dogs are certainly welcome on a leash at most of our river parks. Definitely bring extra water and bags for dog waste. And please make sure those doggy bags end up in the trash receptacle. And finally, be aware of your surroundings while enjoying our river. The river conditions are changing all the time. The Russian River is uneven on the bottom and there are currents in some places, and certainly never dive headfirst in the river. Also be aware cell service does not work in many locations along the river, and as well be extra alert if we are having red flag conditions and the potential for dangerous wildfires that can develop quickly. So with that, I want to thank you for listening, and we'll turn it back over to Supervisor Hopkins.
Thank you so much, Bert. So now we are going to go ahead and start with some questions. Some of them have already been answered in the Q&A, but especially for our viewers who are not coming in through Zoom, we're going to ask a few of those again. And there was an excellent question from Fergus Morrissey, and this one was for Brooke Bingaman, our meteorologist on the panel. And so this question was, it seems like higher global temperatures have expanded the latitudinal extent of the ITCZ, in turn shifting northward the position of the subtropical high, where the Hadley and Farrell cells converge by several degrees. Do you have any thoughts on this? And I want to provide a little bit of context because that's a question that might sort of need a little translation for everyone. So the ITCZ is the intertropical convergence zone, and it is sort of the it's the sort of area basically where the sailors used to call it the doldrums, because the air is rising as opposed to actually blowing with the trade winds, which sort of happens in between where these cells converge. And so sort of the convergence of the cells was known as the horse latitudes, which is where, because there was no wind, the sailors would literally throw their horses overboard in an effort to sort of conserve provisions and make their ships lighter, again, to try to get out of this area. And that is actually where the sort of air is sinking. So whenever you see sort of air rising, right, that's low pressure, that means more precipitation. Wherever you see it sinking, that is high pressure, that means less precipitation. And so from California's perspective, where I grew up in San Diego is about 32 degrees north. So it's kind of part of that subtropical high area, sort of Southern California and Northern Mexico, where you tend to see less precipitation overall. So it's a very interesting question, sort of long-term climate. How will this impact potentially Sonoma County? So with that, I'll hand it over to Brooke.
Yeah, I did see that question earlier and was fascinated by it. I went to grad school in Hawaii, so I often looked at the ITCZ and it was cool to see that somebody else knew about the intertropical convergence zone as well. So I will admit that I haven't looked at any of the latest research to see if it is gradually moving more northward and persistently staying there. But I still have colleagues in Hawaii that I can check with. And I did answer that question and provided my email so that I can do some follow-up with that. But yes, essentially the equator is really warm. The poles are very cold. So where it's warm, it rises, and where it's cold, it sinks. But it's not just one huge circulation. It actually sets up three primary circulations. And Supervisor Hopkins, as you said, down in SoCal, that's where air is sinking. So if that ITCZ is moving northward, then that means that sinking air around SoCal could move northward and might start impacting, the more central parts of California and could possibly affect the Bay Area. So I will definitely follow up with some of the researchers I know back in Hawaii, and I'd be happy to email the person that submitted the question if they reach out to me.
Thank you so much, Brooke, and really appreciate that question. That's an interesting one to dive into. There was a question that Andrea answered in the Q&A, and this is about the current level in Lake Pillsbury. And the question was also, it directly affects Lake Mendocino, correct? So Andrea, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit of information about that. Anyone else who wants to chime in about the system overall?
Hi, Supervisor. Yeah, we do monitor the levels in Lake Pillsbury along with Lake Mendocino and Lake Sonoma. So it is well below its threshold for storage. So that's something we do keep track of, and always happy to publish that. Although it's not usually on our website, we're always happy to include that.
Thank you. A question, and this was actually from an anonymous attendee, is iron algae a concern for pets and wildlife? We are seeing much more of this orange muck in surface water in seasonal creeks, et cetera, in the El Verano section of Sonoma. The iron and manganese content has also risen sharply in some wells in this region. Is this related to the drought? And I'm wondering if Leslie might have any information on this, or if this also might be something where we want to turn to our colleague at the Regional Water Quality Control Board for that.
I think I need to defer to Rich Fadness from the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board.
Great. Rich, do you have anything to add to that?
Unfortunately, I do not. I'm a surface water ambient monitoring program coordinator, so I work specifically with surface waters. And the iron, to my knowledge, iron bacteria is not a toxicant, so it should not be an issue in that respect. As far as levels increasing in groundwater and wells, I really can't address that.
And that is something that I have just a tiny bit of experience with, serving on the Groundwater Sustainability Agency. I do know that actually sort of the concentration of certain minerals, in particular in Sonoma County, we were looking at manganese and arsenic as sort of potential, of concern. That is something that is monitored by the GSAs and is something that the State Water Board considers when we're looking at the health of a groundwater system, because it is true that as groundwater levels decline, sometimes you do see increases in concentration in certain minerals. But I think that would be a great question, maybe that we can take to one of our Santa Rosa or Sonoma Valley. It sounded like that was where the questioner was from. Bring that to the GSA out there. So that would be my recommendation on that. Just looking for a couple of other questions. This is a good one, and I appreciate the anonymous attendee who thinks in worst case scenarios, because here in Sonoma County, we often find ourselves in those. The question is, as the county models drought scenarios, what is the most dire water availability the county has evaluated? And what is the potential response for that worst case model? And so that might be something I'm not sure if, maybe Sonoma Water might be the best to answer that. And also maybe if Brooke has any, kind of suggestions on what some of those worst case scenarios might look like from a meteorological perspective. So maybe I see Don turning on his camera, and then maybe we can do Don and then Brooke.
Good afternoon, Director Hopkins. I'll try to, that's a very complicated question because in Sonoma County, not everybody's served by the same water sources. There's cities and districts that are served by Sonoma County Water Agency that receive water primarily from the Russian River. And so impacts the Russian River, as you mentioned earlier on the 20% diversion reduction, has an impact to them. But then we have, many folks that are dependent on rural groundwater. And so the impacts are different for them than they are for users of Russian River water. But Sonoma Water specifically has looked at some worst drought scenarios, looking out into the climate futures that are available right now. And we were in the middle of a project called the Regional Water Supply Resiliency Study, which is kind of looking at the water system from Potter Valley Project all the way down to Sausalito, and all the how our contractors have local resources, how we have interconnections, how we can leverage that. And we did do specific drought scenarios. The worst scenario actually ended up being if 2022 had been followed by the 76-77 drought. There are, in the climate futures, there are droughts in the future that are longer, but not more severe than that over a 2-year time frame. And we found that there was deficits, but they could be managed in implementing near-term projects. So conservation, pumping more groundwater, looking at opportunities for aquifer storage and recharge. Also, the tools we use with the state board to reduce minimum stream flow requirements in the Russian River when we're seeing these deficits. So there's a technical memo associated with specifically the work on that. It's available. We've been happy to share that. I believe it's posted on our website. If not, I'll work with our government affairs folks to make sure that is. But it goes into the details of that, of looking at that, and it makes recommendations for both short-term and long-term projects to make our region more resilient.
Thank you so much. Brooke, anything to add?
Yeah, it is a complex question because it doesn't just rely on the weather patterns. The state of California has such a huge storage and supply system when it comes to water. So that's another variable. And the state does try to be able to carry California through, more than one dry year. But as we look forward in terms of the climate outlook and what that means for rain patterns, what climate research is showing is that droughts are becoming more frequent and they are often lasting for more than just 1 year. So that trend is likely to continue where we will see these periods of multi-year droughts. Therefore, as we plan and look ahead, we have to be able to prepare for that. Another interesting note that climate researchers have found is that our winters themselves are extremely variable. And we actually saw that this past October and December were very wet months, well above normal, but yet November,